startups, of course, are technical in mind. Like, how many of you guys have a technical background or develop, some things, right? Okay. So of course it's easy on the developer side because you can actually build it, which is great, right? But then you fall in love with your tech. And in tech, obviously, how many of you guys have heard sort of agile software development, right? And it used to be what we call the waterfall method, right? Where of course you build a whole bunch of software and you can spend 6, 8, 9 months, a year building, and then you release it. And then you find out nobody likes or uses or wants what the hell you built, right? So of course we came up with it, and now we've applied it to marketing and startups, hence the lean startup, if you guys have heard of these books, right? And the whole idea is because millions of dollars were invested in these startups in the first boom around 2000, 2001, and then realized like nobody wants to buy pet food online, we weren't ready, all kinds of business models failed because they had a hypothesis and it didn't pan out, right? So we now have agile software development, and we have the lean startup, which is the idea of putting a minimally viable product, right, an MVP. So because you have to really test the market. So at the end of the day, like where you are, right, is we're in customer discovery right here. Stay here and don't leap here. Resist the tendency, right? Because the opportunity is really right here. Like some of the most well-known startups that you know today, Uber isn't what it was. Uber started out with the idea of being a black car on demand, a limo for startup bros in San Francisco who wanted a limo on demand. That's what Uber was, right? And then they discovered, well, like taxis, you can't get on demand, and that sucked. And wow, actually, this could all work, and now we can enlist a whole bunch of people that want to work free, and that whole culture, right? Same thing with Twitter. Twitter did not start out what it was today. Even Facebook, right, didn't start out what it was today. They stumbled on the problem, right? So stay here and pivot. So you have right now, all of you are in a stage, unless all of you are making real money, right? Who's making any money from your startup yet? Anybody? A little bit? Even any bit of money, okay, good. Right? Anybody making money in their startup? So until there's real, okay, right? So until you are, and until you're making significant amounts of money, it's still a hypothesis, right? Because even if people are gonna say to you, yeah, that's a good idea, right? And this is what psychologically, you're all looking for people to go, oh yeah, that's a great idea. You don't have to change anything. That's $1 billion idea. Because that's easy, psychologically, you want that. But that does you a disservice, right? Stay here until you can find a true market traction, right? Then once you actually get real customer validation, people willing to give you money, right? People willing to take a risk, then you have actually validated a business model. Then you can start to actually build and scale a company. Then you can start thinking deeper about features and deeper about marketing and growth, right? But in the meantime, stay in this idea of customer success, of customer discovery, because essentially everything begins with a hypothesis. It's a leap of faith, but you've got to validate that hypothesis, right? And if you guys have read The Lean Startup, Steve Blank, who's an awesome person, you can watch a bunch of his videos. He has this whole idea of like, basically get the hell out of the building, right? Because it's like, and this is classic, like marketing, marketing people. I'm a marketer by heart, though I'm sort of a growth marketer now, which blends sales. But the idea is still about like you sit in typical marketers, we sit in a boardroom or product and we think we're smarter than our customers, right? And we go, oh yeah, the people are gonna love this. You remember like, who's seen, remember the Tom Hanks movie where he's the kid? Big, right? And he's a kid, right? He's in this product development meeting with this like the stuffy like guy, and then he's like, and it was like a building, and it was like a building turns into a robot, and he's like, I don't get it, right? And it's basically kind of the point, like these guys think that these adults have designed toys thinking they know what's fun, and they have a real kid in a man's body who's like, I don't get it, it's not fun. Why is this stupid thing fun? So get out of the building, right, and ask real questions. Test a minimally viable product. That could even be a landing page, right, that shows your idea, gets people to give you their email address. There's some element of risk. So even that's step one, even if you can't charge for what you're doing, right, find ways for people to give some risk to prove to you there's some level of interest, right? The idea in Stephen's work, I talk about what I call the ICP, ideal customer profile. So you want to figure out who that is, right? Because at the end of the day, you're selling to people, and it also depends on the business model that you're in. If it's business to consumer, people are very different, and the buying behavior of consumers is very different than the buying behavior in an enterprise, right? Buyers in an enterprise are super risk averse, and they're basically only going to buy if they think not buying will get them fired, right? Because sadly, most people work in a big company, work just hard enough not to get fired, right? It's just the truth, right? And so most people, it's like the whole classic, well, it's IBM, I'll buy IBM, right? Because it's IBM, there's low risk, right? And so if somebody says, hey, you guys should buy some software, and they're like, well, it's IBM, you know? And if they don't buy it, then like, why didn't you buy IBM? You went and bought, you know, something, right? So depending on knowing who you're selling to is critical, right? Consumers tend to buy more on emotion, right? It's more spontaneous, right? What's the need? Think about the need, even like Red Bull, right? Red Bull, they have literally two sides of the business. They have a media company, Red Bull Media, and they have what they call the can side of the business. It's literally selling cans, right? But all of you guys know, like, how do we know Red Bull, right? We know Red Bull, it's what's the problem that Red Bull is solving?
Giving you wings.
Giving you wings. That's 100% right, actually, right? Because at the end of the day, it's caffeinated, frickin' carbonated, whatever, right? You know, so yeah, it just gives, but they're selling you on what as a consumer, what do we really want? The wings, the belief we can do anything, right? The belief that you can jump out of an airplane, that you can climb a mountain, that you can whatever, right? So the need they're actually fulfilling is not just, oh, giving you some caffeine so you can get your homework done or whatever. The need they're fulfilling is giving you wings, a possibility. And most consumer brands, you know, like Steven said, it's an aspiration, it's a desire, right? Make us feel good, right? So figure out what the problem is and go deeper and deeper and deeper. Like it used to be in marketing, we'd have demographics, right? But we're marketing to groups of people, right? Broad groups. But if you think now, oh yeah, so if anybody asks you who are your customers and you go, well, women ages 18 to 35. Like that's a bad answer, right? Because think about it. Women ages 18 to 35, the age range is hugely broad, right? Number one. Depending on where they live, women ages 18 to 35 are way different. Even just in LA, women ages 18 to 35 on the west side versus women ages 18 to 35 in Pasadena, right? Very different. So now, because of data, because of people come to us when they have a need, right? And that's really the best form of marketing, is those that come to us. It's the most cost-effective marketing, is those that come to us instead of knocking on doors. I still, for growth in enterprise software, I do a ton of outbound, what we call outbound cold email, and there's a whole bunch of stuff going. There's data providers out there. There's a huge industry that does this. If you want to get contact info, it can be expensive. LinkedIn is a great way to do it. So there's still a lot of digital knocking on doors. It happens out of necessity, but the best way to is get people to come to you, right? So the idea is the more that they can come to you because you're solving a real need that they, you know, can really understand how you can solve it, the better, right? So continue to figure out what is the market. So this is a quote from Mark Andreessen, right? The number one killer of a company is lack of market, right? If there's no market, there's no company. If there's no market, there's no customers. Markets are also not fixed, right? Markets are dynamic, meaning there's socioeconomic factors, right? There's new competition. So you got to think about it today when I ask everyone the competition, who might be competition today, but who might be competition tomorrow, right? Because every company is looking for new sources of revenue, and often now big companies can be an opportunity for you. They're big companies like GE and traditional big companies that they're almost too big to innovate, and so they have directors of innovation, and in many cases they partner with startups. They look to acquire startups because they can't innovate at the pace in which they need, and they often find you don't want to be a square peg company in a round hole market, right? And that's happened for a lot. There's a meme, for lack of a better word, it's not really a meme, but it's a little animated GIF that's going around LinkedIn the last week, and it's basically a moving track of global brand awareness. Has anyone seen this in LinkedIn? It's almost addictive to watch. Yeah, it's over like the last like 2 decades, I think. You know, and of course, like the number one, and when it starts, is like Coca-Cola or something,
yeah.
right?
Yeah.
The traditional, like, you know, IBM is in there, right? And of course, by the end, you know, Coke is now at the bottom and Apple's number one, right? And Facebook starts to rise, and Google, and all this, right? And GE and IBM start to fall, right? And it's because these are square peg businesses that have found themselves in a round hole market, right? So GE, who used to be well known for its innovation, can't keep pace. So it can be an opportunity, right? And there's even what's called open innovation. So depending on what your startup is, sometimes you can look, you know, those companies will solicit literally pitches for innovation, and that can be, depending on what you're doing, can be ways to get involved, right? And it also could be potential acquirers. Most startups today, over 50%, they used to be exits when I got in the game, most exits were IPOs, right? Now most exits tend to be acquisitions, right? So, but the key again, before you get to all of that, is what's the market? And the market is a large group of people that have a significant problem that they're willing to solve with significant amounts of money, right? A market where there is not a lot of competition, or competition in which you can do a lot better job with, right? That's the opportunity, and the opportunity is to continue to figure that out, right, with some hypotheses. So I would suggest most of you spend as much time as you can in this area, right? So in a great market, a market with lots of real potential customers, the market will define the product, right? It's the customers will tell you what they want, what the features are, right? They will guide you, right? So before you get to this solution and spend all your time, right, thinking with a developer or building a whole thing, you know, focus on the problem, right? And finding in that market, there might even be an aspect of the problem. That's the other thing, is that many of you, and there's perfectly good reason in a pitch to say, hey, okay, you know, expectant mothers have all of these problems, right? And here's how much money expectant mothers spend in this time in their life, right? But there's one problem that they have that I'm going to start with, right? Even in your clinical trials, there's many components. It's fine to say, like, here's all the things we could do when we're at scale, but we're going to start, right? Even in a go-to-market, we're going to start in Los Angeles, or we're going to start in North America, or we're going to start with this industry segment, right? Or this group of women ages 18 to 22, right, in Middle America, right? Because that's the initial segment where we feel we can get good traction. Now, again, you're going to have some hypotheses, right? And I love to even just create a basic spreadsheet, literally, of all your ideas and rank them by some criteria. I have this, what I built is called a growth engine model. It has a whole bunch of tabs in it. And one of the sheets is literally just sort of this worksheet, right? And you might prioritize like what market segments to go after. And you might have some criteria based on A, your ability to access that market. Okay, maybe you got a guy, right? You know a guy, one of your partners has got connections and they've already got an in there, right? Maybe you know that the cost there in this market is a little bit lower to enter, right? Maybe there's fewer competition. Maybe the buyers in that market have more money to spend than another, right? So just, and again, these are hypotheses, but at least it gives you a focus, right? Because it goes back to isolation, I think, is some cases isolating your focus, right? Because that's what you're talking about. Because the thing is, you know, many of you, it's either just you or 1 or 2 people or 3 to 5 people. You're doing probably other things to like pay your bills at the moment, right? So you gotta be, it's relentless execution. Ideas are easy. And the fact is, what I see the entrepreneur dilemma is that our minds are always going, well, what if this, and what if that? And then if you have too many what ifs, you end up doing nothing, right? And I guarantee you, your idea is not unique. There's 10 or 20 or 30 or 1,000 other people around the world thinking about this idea right now. The winners are the ones that are gonna execute faster than those that don't, right? The winners are gonna be the ones that, like, they just go for it. They prioritize, they take a stab, they're gonna make it happen, right? So find the market and let the market dictate who the product, what the product is. So real product market fit means being in a good market with a product that can satisfy the market. You notice he doesn't say amazing market, and he doesn't say stellar product. It actually would be better to be in a very strong market with a mediocre product than to be in a weak market with an amazing product, right? So you build this amazing thing, right? But nobody wants it. Like, what's the point of this amazing thing, So maybe you got a car that can drive itself and fly or whatever. I mean, okay, that might be a pretty interesting thing, right? But, of something else, like if you're in a weak market with an amazing product, there's still no business. So you're much better off in the beginning to be in a super strong market with a product that can satisfy that market, right? That's the key word. So it doesn't mean, and obviously satisfying that market can actually provide joy and connect people with emotion, because at the end of the day, it's about a need, right? So people have a need. So here's some how to win, right? Now, not every business is going to be an investable business. Some, you could have a perfectly good life with what we call a lifestyle business, right? Some businesses are not venture-backed businesses. And frankly, I would actually tell you all to avoid venture-backed businesses, because in many cases, venture-backed companies ruin the business. And I'll tell you why, right? Because venture investors have one goal and one goal only, which is to return value to the limited partners, right? And the LPs put in money. The LPs are either individual investors that have a lot of money, they're family offices that have raised a lot of money, they're institutional investors, they want return on their money, right? And every investor, it's a portfolio. They know that 1 out of 10 is going to win and the other 9 are going to fail, right? But I mean, even right now, companies I work with right now, they don't care about profitability, they want growth, right? They want to max your growth, right? And to max your growth, because the growth trajectory is what equals a multiple. And the multiple is what equates to value, right? So the higher your growth rate, right, the more money it shows potential investor how big this business could be. So the higher your growth rate, and the growth rate is really determined by the market demand, right? And it used to be like, if you heard the stories of like Instagram, like these businesses that had like millions of users but no money, like no revenue, that's the exception and not the rule, right? There's also a big difference between what I would call the A players and the B players, right? And the C players. The A players, just like Hollywood, if you've done it before, even if you've failed miserably, you're more likely to get money, right? Everyone else, unless you've raised and been part of a venture-backed business, the bar to entry is much, much, much higher, right? You're gonna have to prove a lot more traction than somebody who's done it before, even if they failed, because failure is actually a bragging point in the world of Silicon Valley, right? If you failed, even if you failed miserably, you've been through it, right? You've been through the hard thing about hard things, you get it, right? Right? And in many cases, investors are going to look at, we call it 3 things: team, traction, and potentially tech, right? But it's primarily team and traction are the 2 biggest numbers, right? And team, they want to know about the team is really because if your original idea, the original hypothesis fails, which they know it likely will, that the team, you are strong enough as a team to persevere, to pivot and persevere. You're smart enough not to give up, right? And you will do anything to make it win. And you're smart enough to adapt quickly, to be coachable. So in a lot of cases, investors are interviewing you. And at the end of the day, it's about risk, right? Because every investor, what is it about? It's about low risk, high return, right? That's the win, right? If you can, as an investor, if I can go, wow, that risk is really low, and that return is like unbelievable, because we're all looking at the stock market going like, okay, I get 9 to 10% if I'm lucky, So that's why you invest, top of the pyramid, super speculative, high risk, high risk. Right now it's high risk, but potentially high return. So what you're doing in many cases when you pitch is helping an investor mitigate risk if you want money, right? Even if you're going to get money from a bank is going to look at everything and they're going to go, what's the risk here, right? And they literally have, criteria about who they're going to loan to and what they're. Same thing with with investors, angel investors. If you go to Tech Coast Angels or Pasadena Angels, they have certain criteria and they're going to look at how can they mitigate risk. So in many cases, when you're pitching your story, especially to an investor, you know, really, how are you going to help them mitigate risk and show them a story, tell them a story where it's as low risk and high return as possible, right? So return really comes from the market you're going to go and how you're going to capture it. Risk is everywhere, but particularly overcoming competition. And most people forget competition because it's huge, right? Because especially when you get to market it, right? Most of the time, most of us, it's very difficult, especially with technology. It's easy for us to not understand, you know, for things to become commoditized, right? So you want to come up with, like, you know, what we call a USP, a unique selling proposition. Like, how do I understand how you're fulfilling my need and doing it uniquely and better than anyone else, right? A killer value proposition really adds proof to the promise, because a value proposition is a promise that I as a business can deliver on your need, right? So I'm Uber, right? And I can get you from point A to point B more easily than anyone on demand, right? The proof makes a killer value proposition by adding, especially is the proof, because we've shown that we've delivered more than 5 million rides in over this time period with 5 ratings or more, right? Mitigates risk. So there is opportunity in competition and risk in markets. So in many cases, your opportunity could be if there's competition, because sometimes competition, the right amount of competition, is a good thing because it mitigates risk for an investor. It shows that there's other people there, right? Look at these bird scooters out here, right? Like, so if somebody got into the market, right? I mean, it's kind of an idea that, like, you think, yeah, okay, why didn't it happen sooner, theoretically? Now, obviously, there's some technology that's now made it, you know, possible. But of course, look what happened, right? Bird dumped their scooters everywhere. People started using it. It got a lot of pushback, but now Lime is here, Lyft, Uber, I don't know, everybody's now, there's bikes now. So that certain amount of competition mitigated risk. And they looked at the size of the opportunity and still went, hey, now the opportunity is how can we do it better than the competition, right? So in many cases, competition can show you an opportunity where they're like falling down to something, right? But try and find unique components that are also defensible, right? Now you can defend your own market share either by just owning the customer relationship and making sure you have such a great relationship with customers that that's how you defend your market position. Patents can also do it. To a degree, though, you have to have the ability to defend a patent, even if you have a patent, right? So, but how can you, the best way to defend a market position is deliver a great service and continue to have customers that love you, right? And are not going to be willing or easily able to switch, right? So again, think about the market. Now, there's a great framework called the job to be done framework. And it's essentially like where everybody that's buying a service, whether they're a consumer or a business, there's a job to be done, right? Like in the case of Red Bull, the job to be done is, wow, I want to feel like I can do anything, right? In the case of Uber, the job to be done is I want to get from point A to point B on demand at a low cost, right? And have a reasonably quality vehicle with a good driver, right? But oftentimes people become obsessed by their solution, and your solution is actually on the fringe of the problem, right? It's not focused on the problem itself. So it may be a part of it, but it's not really solving, right? Because you fall in love with the solution, and so you stay stuck over here, and you're not really solving the problem, right? So get as clear as you can on what that problem is. And don't believe your own BS. Because that is psychologically what you want to do, because it's easier, right? It's easier if someone says, oh, it's great. You don't need to change a thing. Like I said, it's $1 billion company. Just need to get it to market, right? But if it was that easy, somebody else would have already done it. It would already be out there, right? So, and you're doing yourself a disservice in a way by believing your own. So when you talk to people and look for people to disprove or invalidate your hypothesis, because that's the goal. You might actually find the real thing. Because of course people want to please you, right? And the way in which you ask questions, there's a whole science, and I think I get some stuff to it. Because again, psychologically, we believe our own bullshit. It's just the way it is, right? And we want people to say, oh, your idea is great. So look for people who will challenge you, right? Because those are the people that will actually help you propel your idea forward. The people that are going to go, yeah, that's great, aren't going to help you, really, right? The ones that challenge you will. And so there's a lot of great things about customer interviews. Because again, if you guys seen this idea of crossing the chasm, so, and again, like, you know, in the 0 to 1, like, sure, there's perfectly viable businesses that are on the down curve, right? But that's not how you're going to build a truly disruptive business or a billion-dollar company, right? You know, you're going to have to take this risk in starting over here. And, you know, and again, sometimes, and depending on who you're selling to, you have to know, right? In many cases, even with a consumer startup, in some cases, there's people, especially like early Airbnb users, you're selling to people that are the early adopters before it becomes like a standard, right? The sharing economy is a relatively new thing, right? And a lot of it does have to do with timing. You guys heard of Idea Lab and Bill Gross? So Bill Gross is one of the early, right? And Bill Gross has invested in, I don't know, like hundreds of companies, and he actually did a whole like study on the performance of his companies and why one's failed and one succeeded. And in most cases, what he ended up finding is that a lot of it had to actually do with timing in the market, right? That was the market ready for that product, right? Actually, in a startup that I ended up selling, not for $1 billion by any means, but with one of the CTOs I found, he basically built YouTube, right? Before it was not YouTube, right? He had servers, you could upload video, you could edit video, but it was before, this is in 2001, 2002, when not everybody had broadband. No one was ready for video. We didn't all have phones, right? So no one was ready for video. And so the business didn't really take off, right? So a lot of it has to do with timing. When is the market ready for that product, right? So ideally, you want to end up being here, cross the chasm to get to the early majority, and this is where we're on the rise, but it's a difficult one to predict, right? So knowing where you are, and again, who you're selling to, because sometimes in enterprise software, like say if it's blockchain, I'm now working with a whole bunch of AI companies, in banking, there's a lot of stuff going on in AI. I truly believe AI will put a lot of people out of work, unfortunately. It's going to be hugely disruptive. And AI, what we're talking about AI today is not really AI, unfortunately, it's more just algorithms, but there is still a lot of potential. But still, like you are selling, and some of the companies I'm working with are selling to, banking and insurance, but you've got to find the early adopter. And some of our messaging is like, where are you on the scale? Are you, what kind of an organization are you? Are you an early adopter or are you a late majority, right? And some institutions are like, fine, we're going to play catch up. Okay, that's just how they are. But they might end up being out of business, right? Those banks that don't use AI to have stellar customer experiences or use AI to like automate back office operations so they can be more competitive. Some of the companies I'm working with are Scandinavian banks. They're like much more the leaders in customer service and in tech than credit unions and others in the U.S. Right? So be clear about like where you are. So again, like researching the customer's job to be done. So the problem is an inverse to the need, right? The problem is the solution to a need. I mean the problem is an expression of what that need is, right? And so are you focused on the most compelling problem? Is the problem real and urgent, Because a lot of times what I see in tech too is that there's problems that are nice to haves, right? You don't want to be in a nice to have business, right? Because nice to have, like for example, I was mentoring a startup, he had this idea, it was a guy, Australian guy, great guy. His idea was called Bark and Borrow, right? So his idea came from, hey, I love dogs, but I can't own a dog where I live, right? And I know people that have dogs, but they can't take care of their dogs and they need somebody to watch their dog when they're not around, right? And so the idea was like bark and borrow. So if I don't own a dog, I can borrow your dog, right? And so then I don't have to fully own a dog, because it's a lot having a dog. I have 3 kids, I'm like, they want a dog, I'm like, no, I can't, we have a fish, I can take care of a fish, okay? We're not doing a dog. But the idea of like borrowing a dog, for the weekend, seemed like kind of a neat idea, right? The problem is, my motive to borrow a dog is a nice to have, not a must have. So the idea of like, yeah, it sounds nice, but when it came down to it, I never borrowed a damn dog. Like, I don't have time to go like meet the person, you know, and the dog people are crazy. It's like they're like their kid, you know, I have to be interviewed, you know. So the people that owned the dog had a much bigger need to have somebody borrow their dog because they need somebody to take care of their dog and walk the dog and all that. So, you know, it's kind of like Tinder for dog watching right now. Now, the motives on dating apps are a lot bigger, right? Like, Tinder and dating is not a nice to have. I mean, kind of it is, but in many ways, it's a fundamental human need, right? You know, I mean, so even the fact that we will put ourselves in really awkward, weird situations just because we want to meet. So it's be a must-have, not a nice-to-have, right? You don't want somebody to go, that seems like a nice idea, but then, no.
Chris, I have a question.
Yeah.
For example, you want to clone an idea, for example, the Tinder. I am working on a dating app for Persian people, okay? I want to bring the dating concept to Persian culture, okay? So should I do the validation, the problem validation? Because it's a global thing, you know?
Yeah. Well, I think for you, I mean, again, it's like, what is the specific problem? Like, why can't Persian people use Tinder, right? And why would they want to use you?
Because of cultural thing, for example.
Well, so that if that's the, you know, if that's a must-have, right? You know, if that's truly 100%, then you need to, you know, prove that theory that the way Tinder is, Persian people won't go there because of culturally, right? So, you know, that's where I think you'd have to find a way to prove that hypothesis. And now, is there a big enough market of those people that will, you know, not use Tinder?
So it's a kind of market thing, yeah?
Yeah, I mean,
validating the market to find out.
100%. You have a hypothesis that people won't use the existing solutions and they will use yours because of X, Y, or Z. Now, what is that, right? Will you authenticate that people are truly Persian? Is there some specific way in which people will meet each other that's different from other things, right? Like, what is the real problem you're solving? You know, I think you need to go deeper into the problem other than just, hey, we have, you know, Persian people won't use Tinder, but why, you know? So go deeper. And then test that assumption. So you got to test that assumption, really, right? So sure, it might seem like the real, but is there a big enough need there, right? So again, if it's culturally, right, I work with a lot of Indian tech companies, and there still are arranged marriages. There's still even ways in which they're not even arranged, but they somehow like see a picture and then they pick the person, you know? And so, you know, is that how it could, you know, so maybe they don't need like a swipe thing, maybe there's something else, right? So test. So and you can test it through surveys, there's a series of things that you can do. Even you can test things through like Facebook advertising, right? Facebook can do very targeted niche advertising with audiences, and you could send people, even just with an ad, you could test a value prop, A and a B, to one audience, right? And if people click, that's one data point, right? Now if you send them to a landing page and get them to sign up, there's some level of risk there. They have to give you their email. Then maybe the next step is you charge a little something, right? So continuously iterate through, like giving, you know, to validate what will people actually do that shows, right? Now in mobile applications, it's a big deal. There's a whole funnel, right? Like mobile applications, it's difficult. It's consumer applications I love and hate because they take a huge amount of money to market, right? And to have real broad-based appeal takes massive sums of money, right? And so you're going to need a lot of money to become successful, right? Or you're going to need something that really grows virally. And the way things grow in a viral way is a really strong, compelling need, right? That spreads virally, and timing and luck, right? So the thing with consumer and mobile application, you have to A, get people aware. So there's a funnel, it's called R, right? Have you seen pirate metrics for startup metrics for pirates? Dave McClure of 500 Startups, which is a really good accelerator in the Bay Area, has this deck called Startup Metrics for Pirates. It's R, it's a funnel. It's called awareness, activation, so acquisition, activation, retention, referral, revenue, right? So you notice revenue's last, right? But especially within a mobile app, you've got to get people to be aware, then they've got to download it, then they actually have to use it, and then they have to use it actively, right? How many of you guys have apps on your phone that you downloaded but you never use, right? A lot. And it seemed like a decent idea, you know, but to get somebody to continuously use that app. And unfortunately, the whole internet, the way it's all designed for addiction, unfortunately, because it's all ad supported. The business model in many cases, most apps, you know, on the web, especially for consumers, are monetized through advertising. And so the only way that they make money is through addiction, right? Getting you to come back and come back and come back again and again, either A, so they can serve you ads, or B, so they can collect data on you to sell to other advertisers, right? I mean, that's the reality. Unfortunately, it's a broken business model, I think, in my future, or in my view, because it leads to the crap rising to the top. The most sensationalist content rises to the top because that's what attracts eyeballs, because everything's monetized through ads, right? Which is why I like subscription businesses a whole lot better, right? But that's a whole nother topic. So there's a whole bunch of, this is like a customer interviews tracking template, just an example. There's a bunch of them you can design out there. But again, I think the key thing is to don't ask leading questions, right? Number one, don't, you know, try and really uncover the problem, right? And really uncover like and trying to dig for problems that you didn't think about at first, that you didn't, you know, that one little nuance of the problem. Because again, you don't have to solve all of the problems. Okay, say in cannabis, right? Okay, in the cannabis advertising piece, right? There might be a whole bunch of problems you could potentially solve, right? And it's a big green field. But what's the one problem right now that you could start with? You know what I'm saying? And then even specifically, right? You kind of said like your market is cannabis, okay, you said 55 billion. You didn't mention in which market. Is it just California, right? Is it the US? Is it the current states in which it's legal, you know? And so even within California, maybe you say, sure, like eventually all of the US, you know, but maybe right now the real problem is navigating regulatory requirements within California or just within Los Angeles, you know? And what's the specific one problem that you guys can solve that no one else is solving right now, you know? Because then you can paint a picture of like, hey, here's all the problems we could solve, and here's how big that market could be, but right now we're starting with this, right? So there's a whole bunch of, I don't know, I guess this video's locked, but this guy, Justin at Customer Dev Labs, has some really great videos. So go to customerdevlabs.com. It's been a little bit since I've been to his site. He has a ton of blog posts and videos, and I think you can buy and subscribe. He monetizes through subscription, I believe, right? Yeah. But there's a bunch of great videos in here about talking to strangers, because you know, again, it's one of those things in a startup, like you guys are going to find yourselves in many somewhat awkward positions, and you're going to have to wear multiple hats. Like A, there's the public speaking bit. How do you get past that? B, you know, articulating a good story. C, talking to customers and real people in a way, like even on the street, you know, or people that you get an introduction to, depending on who your customers are, right? Who are you going to talk to? How are you going to talk to them in a way that you can get really valuable insight, right? So I definitely recommend you check it out. So there's a bunch of good stuff in here from Justin about how to actually do interviews. But here's some great questions. You know, what's the hardest part about the problem? What's the hardest part about dating as a Persian person, right? What's the hardest part? You don't have to answer, but that's a question. Can you tell me the last time that problem happened, right? Why was it so hard, right? What, if anything, have you done to solve that problem, right? Oh, I tried Tinder, but it didn't work, right? Oh, now you get some, what don't you love about the solutions you've tried? Why don't you like Tinder? What happened? What didn't work about it? Notice, not one question was about, hey, I have an app for dating for Persians and it works like this, right? Not one of your discussion points with this customer was about what you have, right? You're trying to get to the root of what was the hardest part about what they're dealing with, what was the last time, so frequency, right? Why was it so hard? Because again, this translates directly into the marketing material. Like all of these, once you learn the answers to this is how you're gonna market, right? You know, the last time that I wanted to, you know, go snowboarding, I was tired, but I felt like I just couldn't do it, you know, or whatever. Like, or I had that business meeting and I just needed to feel like, you know, but I drank that Red Bull and I had wings. I believed I could do anything, you know? That's the inverse to your problem, right? So there's a whole bunch of good stuff in here. Janine has my deck, so she'll share it with you guys. So there's some really good tips. You know, Stephen had some good stuff in his, you know, about how to talk to people as well. But, you know, one person at a time, so you can like really isolation and get down to what their problems are. You know what your goals are and what your questions are. What do you really want to learn? What do you want to uncover? You know, separate kind of behavior and feedback, because people will give you feedback, but what you really want to understand is their behavior, not their opinion. Right? What do they do? You know, get psyched to things that you don't want to hear, right? Be excited. Look for things that challenge you. Get people that, you know, there's a whole bunch of like disarm politeness, because the thing is, people again are going to, especially if you got an introduction, you know, like depending on again what your business is or who you're interviewing, most people, they're going to want to be polite to you. They're going to want to be kind. They're going to want to give you the answer they think you want to hear, right? So try and get them to like disarm the politeness, right? Because you don't care about politeness isn't going to help you in this scenario, right? You'd rather be, which is kind of why sometimes as a mentor, we're a little, you know, harsh, but you don't want us here to go, you're so great, guys, you know, you're going to be billionaires. Just go out there and do it, you know? I mean, you can pay people for those, like, you know, little, you know, talks, right? But that's not, we're not going to do you a service by doing that, right? Ask open-ended questions, you know, focus on actual behavior, not speculative or abstract things, like what did you not like about Tinder when you used it? Not if you were on a dating app, you know, like that won't help you. Like if somebody doesn't have experience with a dating app, they're probably not going to help you. Well, I've been married for 35 years, so okay, well, not going to help you, you know. And avoid, you know, and this is super true in sales, but also in any kind of listen more than you talk, right? Now, often again, as an entrepreneur, you're probably great. Or part of you is like you have to be good at rallying people, and so many entrepreneurs are good talkers, and especially salespeople, right? So when you start to work with salespeople or hire sales, but the best salespeople ask tons of questions, and they listen to the answers, right? Because a salesperson that just like sells and start like, none of us want to hear, like even a car sale, like it's what we hate dealing with salespeople, because we don't want to be sold shit, right? We just don't. We want solutions to problems, right? So a good salesperson is going to go, hey, you know, what are you looking for today, right? They're going to ask you a bunch of questions. So, and then you want to kind of pare it back or like, you know, talk it back to people so people feel heard, and make sure that they actually, that you can reflect back to make sure you're understanding too what they're saying, right? So you can, again, like, because you're going to have a tendency to, again, translate their words into what you want to hear. So you have to kind of parrot it back in a way that, like, am I hearing this correctly? And give them a chance to say, no, that's not what I said. You know, what I meant to say was this, right? So, you know, again, write up your notes as quickly. So there's some basic kind of tactical stuff here. But the idea is that, again, you really want to get down to what is it you want to do. Now, how can you, there's a whole bunch of good stuff, again, like on Justin's site, there's a whole bunch of other stuff. So there's landing page builders. Like now it's easier to build, you know, websites, right? You can even use Wix, you can use Squarespace. Unbounce is one of my favorite landing page platforms. It's awesome just for building landing pages. There's another platform. There you can look up landing page building tools, and it's a great way to basically create a landing page with a form, you know, put up some content. And again, even some other things that I built even is doing surveys. You can do incentivized surveys. Like Typeform is a great survey tool. Like SurveyMonkey is kind of common, but Typeform is really elegant. You can embed Typeform in other pages, but you can do surveys like that. Because there is some element of risk. If people are willing to give you some information for something, you know, there's some, you know, some traction demonstration that, hey, they're interested, they're willing to do that, right? So check that out. But there's a whole bunch of good MVP tools, again, that you can try, depending on what you're building, right? Even like, especially the mobile app, oftentimes like mobile apps are like, again, like I said, I'm not a fan of consumer stuff, but because it's really like opening the most popular club you can figure out, right? If you're gonna open the most popular club in Santa Monica, what would you do? You wouldn't just throw open the doors and go, hey, come on in, everybody. Because you want the idea of exclusivity, right? Robinhood, how many of you guys have heard of this app, Robinhood? Like it's one of the big fintech, you know, winners. And Robinhood had this whole buzz around Robinhood. They gated it. They were ready to launch, but they were like, they had a private beta, they had invites, and then they had this whole gamification thing where they, once you signed up, right, for their beta, they gave you the place in line in which you were, and if you took certain actions, you could jump ahead in line. I think it's called, I'm trying to remember, it's not kickbox.io, but it's another, something similar where they had some gamification. It's a landing page building tool, but you can do some stuff like that. There's another platform, there's a few of them out there that have some gamification for like doing beta. Like, so obviously that's like one way, another initial way to like say, if people are willing to say, hey, sign up because I want to get ahead in line, and they're willing to do some things, that's also some demonstration. Because that's something you're going to have to, the traction you're going to get is what you're going to have to get to work, right? So even if you're going to try and raise in what we call FF&F round, who knows what FF&F is, right? Friends, family, and fools, yes, unfortunately, right? So, but even if you're going to raise some money from, you know, FF&F, you know, you might have, the only traction you might have is, hey, we did some initial advertising, we sent out an email, you know, we built an email database, we invited X number, we sent out 1,000 emails, and we got a 20% response rate, and we got people to sign up for our beta, right? Now we need some more money so we can do some more advertising, you know, but like there's some element of proof, right? So whatever proof you have, you got to work with what you've got, right? And continue to build it out. So, you know, the idea again is like, you know, you have this sort of very data, because now we have data, you know, like there's a lot, bless you, there's a lot of data you can do, you know, so the idea is like launch, collect some data, right? Review that data. So again, let's say, usually I recommend people start with email, like start with everybody you have in your network, right? Start building a database, right? As much as you can, of influencers, of advisors, of potential customers, right? That's the first thing you usually start. LinkedIn, of course, is a great way. Continue to build a database in MailChimp, right? And that could be some metric. Okay, we sent out an email to 1,000 people, like I said, we got a 20% open rate, we got 5% of the people to click, and X number signed up. See, there's a funnel there, right, at the end of the day, right? So you might email 1,000 people, but 5 people downloaded the app, right? But at least there's some number there. So now, okay, what do I do? What can I do? Why? Because everything in growth hacking or growth marketing is about experimentation, rapid experimentation, and coming up with a hypothesis. So I sent out an email to 1,000 people, 20% opened it, you know, 3% clicked through, right? Well, why? You know, and what can I do to get better? Was it the list? You know, maybe they weren't the right people. Maybe, you know, an email, like the subject line gets open, so a lot of people opened it, but they didn't click. Why? You know, and so you come up with some ideas and try and improve it. Maybe they just weren't interested enough, right? Relaunch. So it's the idea of continuously doing some testing. So even if you have the app, right? Okay, you're going to get some amount of data. Some people will use it. You start reporting what we call, you know, DAUs and MAUs, daily active users and monthly active users, right? And so you're going to come up with some hypotheses. Well, why do we have X number? We got this. Why is our usage only this? What do we do, right? A lot of it's designing for addiction, of course, like little red notification, you know, push notifications. But mostly it's going to come from people having a compelling need that's a must-have, not a nice-to-have, right? But coming up with how can you continuously iterate, and same thing with that's the whole agile marketing and agile software development is continuously coming up with why, how can we get more people to use it, right? So really your goal, again, and I would say the goal for you guys, even over in this coursework, right? Even because how many weeks a week? It's 8 weeks?
No, 14.
14 weeks, right? So 14 weeks, it's a critical investment of your time, right? Use this time to really find the customer or segments of customers that have a real need, right? That you can solve better than somebody else out there. That's going to be what you will get the most out of this 14 weeks if you can really get clear on that. And continuously just prioritize week over week. Like, what are the 3 most, I love working in threes, what are the 3 most important things I can do this week? And don't worry about anything else, right? Every week, prioritize. What are the 3 things I'm doing this week, right? And if you come into your way, I shouldn't second guess, don't second guess yourself. Prioritize, work through it, move on, you know? So, what's the big job to be done in an underserved market? What's the compelling value proposition? So that's really the inverse of the problem, right? That best resonates with your customers. And what priority features, what things should be included in your MVP that really deliver and solve on that need. You know, and so again, as facts exist outside the building, opinions reside within, right? So we're here, we're all in opinion world right here, right? And when you sit at home or we talk to your partners or your buddies or your friends, it's all, you're living in opinion land, right? And you know, businesses aren't built on opinions, right? They're based on facts and people willing to do things that really, you know, contribute growth. So your goal is to find a fit with your product and a fit with the market. Product market fit. That's what we're trying. And there's, you know, what is product market fit, right? In my view, product market fit is basically, again, finding out what the need in that market is and developing a solution that people, really significant number of people, are going to actually want and are demonstrating that they have that need. And that demonstration could come in a variety of forms. Ideally, like I said before, because our bar is much higher than those A players that have done it before, the bar that we have to demonstrate is that people are actually, in most cases, putting money on the line, right? You know, rather than just using for free, right? So hopefully that's been helpful for everybody. I think that's the end of my deck. There's a few other little like links in here. Customer Dev Labs, Mark Andreessen has all his blog posts, I think, online. You can read them all, Customer Steve Blank. So yeah, hope that helps.
Questions for Chris?
You're all just, probably your brains are exploding. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm trying to solve this market, the problem of a network effect. I come to this solution, you know, based on my research. If you want to have a successful dating app which match people, you need 5,000 people in an area. Okay, so I'm going to design a landing page with kind of gamification, which just for audience building, not releasing the app, just first building the audience. And the question is that by this landing page, I can't, you know, test and examine if they pay, because I need them first to come in. Maybe the first movers should become free for this kind of network effect, because I need huge amount of girls. And
right, you have a market, so you have like what I would call, it's a two-sided marketplace.
Yeah, exactly.
Now again, if maybe some people want boys and girls, it's a multi-sided marketplace, okay? You know, it's a new world, right? Okay, so, I don't know, maybe not in Persian culture, but okay, but you know.
It's actually not multi-sided, it's asymmetrical.
You're right.
Yeah.
Right.
Multi-sided means you're selling ads to one and selling the other.
Right. It's right, it's an asymmetrical market.
Yeah, right, asymmetrical. Yeah.
Right,
That's
100%.
a big challenge. Yeah.
Exactly. And so the other thing is I would stress for all of you, everything's objective driven. What's your objective? See, so what I'm hearing, on one hand, you have a customer acquisition objective, right? I would stress that your objective now is market validation, and be clear, because the choices you make on the tactics you employ are going to be different depending on your objective, right? So an acquisition objective, one is to like, okay, put up a landing page and try and get a bunch of people to sign up. There's a whole bunch of acquisition objectives. You could hire a street team to wander around Santa Monica, or you could have an event, a live real world event. There's a ton of different ideas for acquisition.
May I have your attention, please? The library will be closing in 30 minutes. The second floor restrooms will be closing in 15 minutes. If you need a library card, please go to the customer services desk immediately. Thank you.
Right? So maybe you have an event at the library. Just make sure you're out by 9 o'clock. But I mean, in seriousness, you could actually have a real, I mean, you know, so think about what's your objective, and because I'm hearing a couple of objectives in, again, you're thinking solution, right? Rather than what's the problem. So you're thinking solution, and I'm hearing a couple of things here, right? So be clear what's your objective, I think. Any other questions? Yeah.
Yeah, you know, I'm new and there's a lot of stuff that I'm learning, so what about outsourcing to get some kind of help? Is that good when you start now?
100%, yeah, I mean, absolutely. So, again, what's your objective, right? So I think in the early days,